Ano ang gusto nyo ngayong mangyari? Even na ito yung mga problematic areas natin. Ano ngayon ang gusto nyo?
Magandang tanghali po sa lahat. Okay. Share screen lang po ako. Oops. Okay, so welcome back to the Intern Talk. This is now our afternoon session, and let's start with the program. So we will have two presentations this afternoon, just like this morning, and we'll follow the same pattern as earlier. So 20 minutes presentation, 20 minutes discussion and examination by the panel, and then followed by the open forum, and then we'll end the Intern Talk at 3:22 p.m. So let's now head to our first presentation this afternoon. So this study is entitled Comercio y Defensa, the role of Puerta and Rebellion del Parian in the history of Intramuros during the Spanish colonial period. This study adapts Freely's heritage cycle and demonstrates the importance of understanding Puerta and Rebellion de Parian's history, as its importance and value directly influence the rebellion and Gates conservation and protection efforts. This study is conducted by Proceso II, an incoming fourth-year student of history from the Polytechnic University of the Philippines, Manila. His research interests include European history, local, economic, and oral history of the Philippines. Marilou M, an incoming fourth-year student at the Polytechnic University of the Philippines, currently pursuing Bachelor of Arts in History degree. Her research interests include cultural, social, and oral history in the Philippines. Sharmaine Mercado, an incoming fourth-year student of BA History from the Polytechnic University of the Philippines, Manila. Her research interests are predominantly in oral history with the goal of bringing to light the collective narrative and experiences of individuals who have been marginalized in history and European studies, because she wanted to develop an interdisciplinary understanding of Europe's complex history and politics. And Angel Gabriel Saavedra, an incoming fourth-year student of BA History from the Polytechnic University of the Philippines, Manila. Her research interests include Philippine economic and local history. Most of her papers focus on trade and commerce using historical and statistical approach. So without further ado, I'll give the floor to the researchers.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. So to the audience and to our panelists, Mr. Jonathan Balsamo and Mr. Nikko Jay Ramos, we would like to welcome you to the afternoon session of the Intramuros Administration Intern Talks. So I am Angel Saavedra. Along with me is Ms. Sharmaine Mercado, Mr. Proceso II, and Ms. Marilou M. Can we move to the next slide? Okay. So what you're seeing now on your screens is a photo of a historical site inside the Intramuros city. So that is the Puerta and Rebellion del Parian, which is the main subject of our paper. So the history of particular places inside the walled city reflects the history of the whole community. So just like how historians began studying the past, from focusing only on the bigger picture, through time it evolved into a more embracing subject that now includes the minorities inside a locality. And that is the case of what was once the usual works with regards to Manila and Intramuros studies. Extensive research works regarding the history of Intramuros walls and fortifications are inadequate, or I might say you can hardly find any to further promote historical awareness. And by awareness, people can develop interest on protecting the heritage and value of such historical elements. Next slide, please. By that, our study entitled Comercio y Defensa, the role of Puerta and Rebellion del Parian in the history of Intramuros during the Spanish colonial period, aims to understand the significance of Puerta and Revelin del Parian through discussing its role as the gate of commerce and a defensive wall. Next slide. So I have mentioned earlier that one of the gaps we have seen while browsing works regarding Manila and Intramuros studies ay yung kakulangan ng pag-aaral regarding the Intramuros gates, walls, and fortifications, specifically regarding the Puerta and Revelin del Parian. So therefore, this study aims to answer the following questions. First, what is the significance of Puerta and Revelin del Parian in the history of the Spanish colonial times in the Philippines up until the Second World War? And what is the importance of having an improved and effective policymaking in relation to the promotion of historical awareness? So why do we need to answer this question? Can we move to the next slide? So through discussing its narrative, we would like to provide insights on how to further promote the value of the site. So with regards to Intramuros administration's mission to contribute to the strengthening of the Philippine identity and historical consciousness, again, we would like to provide insights on how to further promote Puerta and Revelin del Parian. Next. Thank you. So for a quick background, our study will discuss major narratives regarding the role of Puerta and Revelin del Parian from the year it was established, which is in 1593 and 1603 respectively, until the end of the Second World War. So on the other hand, given the limitations brought by the pandemic, the data collection for this paper will be gathered primarily from the internet sources. Next. And so just like what I've mentioned, majority of our sources came from e-libraries and online sites, while some archival photos that we have used for this study, specifically for the discussion part, came from the IA archives collected when our group visited the site just a few weeks ago. Next. For the conceptual framework, in support of the problems of the study, we have used the framework called Heritage Cycle Frameworks, which is developed by Mr. Simon Turley, an architectural historian. So he said in his paper that they want to establish a historic cycle where an increasing understanding of historic site or environment leads to people valuing it more and further care for it better. So this cycle demonstrates the importance of having or understanding the site's history and kung paano siya directly nakaka-influence sa paggawa ng conservation and preservation efforts. So by raising people's historical consciousness, further, it will lead on supporting improved plans and policy making. And once the local government have contributed to the strengthening of the people's historical consciousness, through time, people will value the gate and the Ravelin and show interest on protecting the value of the site. So to discuss the first part of the main body of our paper, I will now give the floor to Ms. Mercado.
For this part, we will discuss the history of Puerta and Revelin del Parian on its role in commerce and defense during Spanish colonization. Chinese merchants were already present in the country even before the Spaniards came. These Chinese were known as Sangley, which means as a usual visitor but not a permanent settler. Their population grew rapidly as more traders came to the country. And most of these Chinese heavily participated in the galleon trade in 1565. Most of them trade goods and rice traders. This barter trade system relies heavily on Pasig River. Pasig River passes near this gate at Puerta del Parian, making it convenient for carrying loads of rice and selling it to merchants in other parts of Manila. The rapid rise of Chinese population in Manila was seen by many Spaniards as a threat. With their numbers, they can start a revolt and overthrow the Spanish government while also considering they might be supported by neighboring China. Most of them also resisted the conversion to the Catholic faith. Due to this, the Chinese in Manila were restricted to a settlement called Parian in 1581. It is situated on a marshy ground at the south of Pasig River and was just outside Intramuros to keep them within firing range by Spanish cannons. Even though they were segregated, the Chinese still flourished by offering various services, and they opened their shops inside the Parian and supplied bread, sugar, and other products. They also manufactured metalworks, gunpowder, and clothes, which are made in Parian instead of instead of importing from China. The Chinese established solely an entire an, the Chinese established an enterprise solely to provide the needs of the colonial government. The Puerta del Parians then served as a leading gate to supply the residents. On the other hand, there were reports about discrimination and abuse of Spaniards to the Chinese. The Spaniards usually forced them to pay fees such as house tax, license fee, and other. As I mentioned earlier, they also saw Chinese community as a threat. The governor and Captain General then thought carefully about the strategy for strengthening the city and providing supplies required for its defense and safety. To further discuss this part, I will now give the floor to Mr. Proceso II D.
Thank you. In this part, we'll be discussing the role of the Puerto del Parian in the defense of the walled city. So as previously discussed by Ms. Mercado, we can tell it's apparent that the Spaniards had an attitude towards the Sanglis. We can tell that they have very little trust towards the Sanglis. And this anxiety of a potential hostility coming from them came true when they revolted in 1603. They almost managed to enter the city during the revolt, but was stopped at the gate of the Parian because of what seems to be an apparition. In the recollection of a soldier witness to the revolt, he mentioned that when the rebels arrived at the gate of the Parian, they stopped, and then because they saw an image of a crucified Christ, his blood dripping on his body, and on the foot of the cross was Saint Francis on his knees and looking upon the crucified Jesus. This imagery, according to the recollection of this soldier, scared the rebels and pushed them back. Although it would be difficult to say if it would be difficult to assume whether it actually happened or not, this morbid imagery, but it only tells us that the rebels wasn't able to besiege the city of Intramuros. Now, after the revolt, next slide please. After stopping the revolt, the Spaniards improved the fortification of Puerto del Parian. They built what is now known as the Ravelin del Parian, which is a triangular fortress. It has cannons directly pointed over the settlement of the Sanglis. Next slide, please. Another significant event in the military history of Puerto del Parian was the British invasion. So before the English captured Manila, the city's fortification was already in jeopardy. The small palisades were already in ruins, while the walls itself were already in bad shape. There was no effective line of defense since the bastions protruding from the walls were poorly placed. In his recollection of the British invasion of Manila, Manuel Antonio Roja y Viera described the gate of the Parian, how the gate of the Parian was poorly guarded, just like other locations or other strategic locations around the city. So, quote, "From the bastion of San Gabriel to the gate of the Parian on the east of the city is located a false screen or barbacan with its parapet and banquet. It is defective, for it is fallen and has no gates for the retreat of the soldiers. The gate of the Parian is covered and defended by a small outerwork in the form of a crown, and the royal gate by a ravelin so poorly placed and so poorly ordered that it cannot defend the faces of the collateral bastions of San Andres and of the Foundry." In the gate of the Parian, during the British invasion, 17 British and 5 Spanish soldiers lost their lives. The attack inflicted damage over the walled city. The Puerto del Parian was rebuilt in 1782 to the design it has now. And it took the role of Puerto Real as the main gate of the city, where the newly appointed governor generals enters the walled city for the first time and acquires the key to the Cabildo. Now, to further discuss the Puerto del Parian during the 1800s up to the Second World War, I now give the floor to Ms. Malu.
Thank you. Back po muna, please. Okay, so for almost 2 years, from 1762 to 1764, the Philippines was part of the British Empire. And after the invasion of the British Empire, the Manila, which was taken by the British, returned to the Spanish government and would remain to them for more years. Simon de Anda y Salazar, as Spanish Governor General, told the king about the injustices of the friars to the Filipinos, emphasizing that this island needed a better government and better rulers. So therefore, when he returned to the Philippines in 1770, he was officially appointed again as the Governor General. And during its tenure, he managed to revamp the Manila's fortification since there were so many damages left by the British invaders, and especially due to the fear of another invasion. So additionally, in 1769, Junicio O. Kelly, a military engineer, proposed to deepening the moats and fronting the sea and adding parapets to the walls. So in 1872, the Puerto del Parian, which played significant role during British invasion, was being reconstructed. So Intramuros became a symbolic area not only during Spanish, but also in American period, because it somehow represents a social status to those people in this area. During American occupation, trade was largely open in Manila, and even though Intramuros that time was under a minor renovation, it remained an active trade city. However, when Japanese Empire arrived and invaded the Philippines, because of their ruthlessness, almost all of the buildings and streets were severely damaged. So to protect the walled city from this attack, from the attack of the Japanese troops, an artillery was already in position at the post office and city hall. And since the Japanese troops had covered and blocked the Parian Gate with strong pillboxes just inside the wall, the American soldiers believed that it was essential to launch many assaults in order to throw the Japanese troops off guard and divide their forces, since they were aware that the Japanese troops had created a complex tunnel system to move or quickly shift their troops from one area of Intramuros to another. So they had breached the wall between Quezon Gate and Parian Gate, and it resulted in a major damage to the aforementioned gates and wall. The Parian Gate was severely damaged because to inflict its wall, heavy artillery was used by the American soldiers for them to be able to enter and fight within the walled city. So due to the first battle between the American, Filipino, and Imperial Japanese forces, Intramuros, specifically the Puerta del Parian and Rebellion del Parian, were mostly destroyed up until the end of the World War II. And during the restoration of Parian Gate in 1981, the laborers from the Intramuros administration discovered many skeletal remains that buried there, and was found out that those skeletons were from the Second World War, and most of which were identified as Japanese soldiers. And when the Japanese government found out that those skeletons were from them, they brought back the skeletons to their country and buried them to the cemetery for unknown soldiers. In the next slide, we will now proceed to our analysis. Next po. Next slide po. Thank you. So for our analysis, since the establishment of the Intramuros administration, it has been in charge of overseeing the development and restoration of Intramuros. It is able to manage land use, architectural design of construction projects, roadway usage, archaeological digs, etc., through the utilization of contracts with private and governmental groups. And it has facilitated substantial projects in the restoration of the old Intramuros. as well as initiatives to promote its cultural assets and enhance historical awareness. So promoting the history and significance of Puerto del Parian and its Travelin will help to create more effective policies, make better financial decisions, and execute better programs, and so on. And as new plans and initiatives are developed, the promotion of the site's importance will lead to an improvement of Filipinos' historical awareness, and which will eventually shed light on the Intramuros administration's aim to support the development of Filipinos' sense of pride and belonging. The policies of the IA are ongoing and implemented to the conservative of the place. However, citizens and local groups such as municipal authorities are primarily responsible for maintaining the historic landscape. Additionally, we have also analyzed that despite of the implemented plans and policies of the IA, there are still some areas that need focus to further promote the historical and cultural value of Puerta and Rebelin del Parian. And we have also noticed that information of the aforementioned sites were limited for the residents and visitors to see. There's still a lack of historical information about the sites that must be addressed. So to conclude our discussion, I will now give the floor to Ms. Angel Saavedra. Thank you.
And thank you, Ms. Gaton. With that being said, we have concluded that Puerta and Revelin del Parian have significantly played a role in the history of Intramuros in terms of commerce and defense. So the gate in Ravelin must be remembered on how the Spaniards have this kind of on and off relationship with the Chinese or the Sanglis. The gate, which was built facing the community of the Parian de Arroceros, so Parian de Arroceros is a Chinese settlement in Manila, served as the gate leading to the market. So while the ravelin and walls surrounding the gate was built as a defensive line, primarily against the Chinese. So aside from that, we have included some findings with regards to the role of the gate after the Spanish colonial period. So to summarize, during the American colonial period, trade was largely open in Manila. And during the Japanese invasion, the gate in Ravelin served as a battlefield or site up until the end of Second World War, which became a reason for the site's complete damage in 1945. So in support of our aim to help to further promote historical consciousness, in our paper we have recommended the project entitled Raising Historical Awareness, Preserving the Puerta and Revelin del Parian's Significance and History. So this project seeks to educate people, and our main target are the students. So to educate people with the historical narrative of the Puerta and Revelin del Parian, with the purpose to conduct mini lecture events provided by the IA and its interns. So therefore, we would like to end this presentation by highlighting that promoting the history of Intramuros walls and fortifications is a best practice to protect its cultural and historical value. That by fostering the desire to comprehend its significance and value is also to ignite and challenge or channel the Filipino identity of the visitors or the residents of the Intramuros. So that is all, and thank you very much.
Okay, so thank you for that presentation. We'll now move to our panel discussion. Our panelists are Mr. Jonathan Mo. He is the head of Valenzuela City Cultural Affairs and Tourism Development Office and Action Officer of the Valenzuela City Culture and Arts Council. He finished his bachelor's degree in history at Polytechnic University of the Philippines. He is also a part-time history instructor at PUP and pamantasan ng lungsod ng Valenzuela. He serves as Secretary of the Philippine Historical Association and founding chapter commander of the Proceso Chapter of the Order of the Knights of Rizal. In Valenzuela City, Mr. Balsamo led the development of Valenzuela City Museum and MUSEO ni Dr. Pia Valenzuela, restoration of Castrillo Monument, conservation of Eggbird Memorial Cannon, and Arkong Bato. And Mr. Nikko Jay Ramos, a social science subject teacher at the Ateneo de Manila Senior High School. He finished his BA in History from the Polytechnic University of the Philippines, Manila, and is currently pursuing his MA in History at the University of the Philippines, Diliman. Currently, he is working on the history of physical disabilities in the Spanish Philippines. So our panel discussion will start with Sir Jobal and then followed by Sir Nikko. So, Sir Jobal?
Okay, good afternoon, Sir Christian. Malinaw ba yung aking audio? Yan.
Yes po.
Okay,
Malinaw po,
thank you,
sir.
thank you. Okay, kasi nasa ano ako, isang DOT workshop ako ngayon no on God. Anyway, magandang excuse to para wala ako sa workshop. Anyway, magandang hapon po sa lahat no. Congratulations to our presenters. Nakakatuwa na meron kayong ganitong opportunity no from IA, and at the same time nakakapag-ambag tayo doon sa awareness pa no sa Intramuros. Minsan nakala natin parang ano yan tatlong level no, meron talaga yung walang alam no. Ikalawa yung medyo may alam, at yung pinakamataas yung may alam, talagang expert level, parang ano, Dr. Victores na yon no, na ultimo lahat ng sulok kabisado. So ako ilalagay ko yung sarili ko sa medyo may alam no, kasi nagtrabaho ako sa Intramuros dati no. I was part of the Intramuros Tourism Council, and then well now no, and this is actually may ano na no, kumaga yung point of view ko is I'm coming from the point of view of the LGU no, because I work as the head of the Cultural and Tourism Office of Valenzuela, and yung ganitong mga paksa ng heritage conservation no, ay bumabagsak sa Cultural and Tourism Office ng bawat LGU. So doon ako nang gagaling. Sinusubukan kong tingnan yung inyong presentation not as a history teacher or researcher, but as a tourism officer of an LGU. And pero mahirap sa Intramuros kasi merong IA. So parang medyo sabi ko, ang swerte-swerte ngayon ng LGU ng Manila no, kasi kumbaga medyo nabawasan na sila ng trabaho no, kasi there is a dedicated office which is IA no, na may mandate dito sa pagpe-preserve and pagpo-promote ng Intramuros. So I understand doon sa inyong paper, dalawa yung inyong focus no. Una yung significance ng Puerta del Parian at yung Revelin, at itong significance no ng sa policy making, and you are referring to the CMP of Intramuros. So in terms of significance, so I think marami naman ng mga nasulat no about Intramuros, and I believe pati dito sa kwento ng Puerto del Parian no. At maganda naman yung malinaw naman no, it's really for the Chinese no. Ito yung dedicated gate no for the Chinese no. At alam natin pag Chinese, it's always connected to commerce no. And then because of yung threat o yung sinasabi ninyong attitude no ng mga ng Spaniards no sa mga Chinese, kaya yung Revelin, so defense no. And then so parang malinaw naman na yung narrative niya no. Siguro for the presentation, ang gusto kong makita sana o hinanap ko ay ano yung sa side naman ng mga Chinese, kasi it's part of the significance of the place, di ba? Parang hindi ko nakitaan ng attempt no o kahit short description or space no para tingnan din yung paano ano ang significance ng site dito for the Chinese, kasi dedicated nga siya for the Chinese, di ba? So halimbawa, saan natin pwedeng makita yung expression no ng site na ito no. So I remember merong sa Bahay Chinoy no, may gallery doon, may diorama roon na I think Puerta del Parian yung naka-picture, tsaka syempre 'di ba yung mga revolts no ng mga Chinese no. So parang sa museum ng Chinese importante itong sa Bahay Chinoy no. So importante itong part na ito because ito yung kanilang bahagi sa kwento ng Intramuros. So yun no, pwede nating laanan ng, kasi we're talking about the significance of the site, hindi lang naman yung kung ano yung reported sa mga documents, no, o sa history ng site, but also yung significance na tingin ko ay significance na binibigay ng present Chinese community sa Manila, because malaking bahagi ng kwento nila at bahagi ng kwento ng lugar na ito silang mga present Chinese. So we can possibly look into tawag dito side ng Chinese sa kwento ng site. And then tatawid ako dun sa CMP, no. Buti nabanggit ninyo ito kasi sa ngayon ito na talaga yung ini-encourage na process, no, pagdating sa conservation, no, may plano. Even the National Historical Commission, kung ang mga LGU ay may gagalawin na mga heritage sites and structures, no, para bigyan sila ng permit o ng clearance ng National Historical Commission, ay magpapasa sila ng development plan o kaya ng CMP. So dito sa Intramuros, no, of course yung nabanggit niyo na yung ginawa noong 2019, no, and so parang dapat yung history ng site and place ay informs, no, yung strategy paano ito i-conserve. So medyo nabanggit niyo yung sa umpisa, pero parang hindi natin na-sustain yung discussion, no? Well, I understand limited yung space, no? But if you have time and you want to further develop the paper, you can actually padagdagan yung discussion doon sa CMP, no? Kasi yung CMP yung basis ng policy making. Paano ito, anong scenario, no? I'm giving scenario, hindi ko dinidiktahan ng IA o kung sino man, ha? Halimbawa, yung nakita natin yung character ng Puerto del Parian, no? So, alam naman, pero andyan na kasi yun yung ASEAN Garden. Parang, okay, so Chinese, pag sabing Puerto del Parian, it's commerce at saka yung Revelin. Malinaw, no? It's commerce and yung defense, no? Because naging threat yung mga Chinese, no? Nung early 1603 onwards, no? So, ano siya, dedicated to Chinese. Parang Chinese yung pagpunta ka sa lugar, gusto mo, ini-imagine mo yung Parian dito, no, fronting the gate, no, the Arroceros. But what you will see now is an ASEAN Garden, di ba? So parang hindi siya connected. Parang ASEAN Garden is parang, di ba? Hindi siya pasok doon sa character, sa history ng lugar, di ba? So probably baka yung ASEAN Garden is mas better in other place na may connect talaga for ASEAN, di ba? Unless we want to say na it's ASEAN ASEAN another defense to the Chinese, no? I mean, I'm just I'm sorry, and of course dapat gino-joke na. Pero I mean, interpretation kasi to di ba? So baka ganun ba yung ganung statement? So parang kung yung CMP na nakita natin yung history niyan, ganyan, tapos it's part of the CMP, then yung CMP can part nung policy making or nung yung development na i-introduce sa place, dapat pasok sa kwento ng lugar, di ba? So in that case, kung yung scenario ay gagawin pa lang yung ASEAN Garden, of course, nauna kasing nagawa yung ASEAN Garden bago yung CMP. Di ba? Parang another reason siya to suggest na let's do the ASEAN Garden, let's put the ASEAN Garden in a better place related to ASEAN, and let's try to di ba, kung may development dun sa area, relate it more to the history of and the historical character of the place, which is, di ba, may kinalaman nga sa Parian and the Chinese. Especially yung Arroceros Park ngayon, hindi mo na siya makitaan ng Chinese press, tangible na pang Chinese, mako-connect mo sa history ng site, sa history ng site, sa layer niya as a Chinese space, di ba? Because na-develop na siya into a metropolitan theater, etc., etc. So, yun yung tingin ko magandang tawid, no, from yung historical significance and character ng site na tatawid sa policy to govern the development of the site and structure, no. So yun lang actually ang aking suggestion, and sabi ko nga andun ako sa level na may alam ako sa Intramuros, pero actually napasadahan ko na siya pero ngayon ko lang siya nabigyan ng pansin nga. Pag nakita ko yung Revenant, it's really defense, di ba? And it's the manifestation, no, sabi nyo nga, of the attitude of the Spaniards, no, towards the Chinese during that period, no. So isa pa, no, na-amuse din ako kasi sa akin bago rin, mabago, parang napaalala sa akin, no, yung declaration, yung 1951 declaration sa Puerto del Parian, no. Akala ko dati Fort Santiago lang, no. So meron pala siyang Puerto del Parian, no. So ano kaya yung meron bang, bakit kaya nung 1951 na-declare ito, yung pinaka-basis for the declaration of Puerto del Parian? Yung Fort Santiago, understandable, no? Kasi mas malitaw yung kanyang historical character, no? At saka yung layers of history niya. Pero yung Puerto del Parian, di ba? Among the other gates of Intramuros, no? Bakit itong Puerto del Parian ang mas na, because ba doon sa authentic yung remaining na authentic parts of the land of the structure, o ito ba doon sa design? Makikitaan ba natin yung Puerto del Parian, yung design ba niya ng Chinese connection, di ba? So magandang bigyan din niyo ng discussion yon sa unang space sa inyong paper. So thank you.
Okay, thank you, Sir Jabal. Sir Nikko?
Narinig ako. Rinig ako, Sir Krishna.
Mahina po.
Mahina. Tatlo lang yung mic. Eto, rinig ako.
Ayan. Okay.
Okay. Hi. Sorry, nandito rin ako sa work. Regarding sa paper ninyo, before siguro, I just want to congratulate you dito sa sa paper ninyo, and of course sa Intramuros administration. Yun, I agree dito kay Sir Balsamo regarding doon sa naging daloy ng paper ninyo. Medyo hindi nyo naipakita yung regarding dun sa policy, pero regarding sa significance ay yeah, okay naman. Kasi binasa ko yung paper ninyo and nakita ko doon na medyo hindi maganda yung nangyari dito sa citation style ninyo. Yung iba ay in text, yung iba ay footnote, and I don't know. Pero on your final paper, siguro gawin nyo yung maging consistent kayo sa mga citation ninyo. And yeah, regarding doon sa paper ninyo, I know na mahirap mag-conduct ng research during the pandemic. Ngayon din naman, no? Pero maraming articles and studies online regarding doon sa the Chinese in the Philippines, and mas reputable siya kumpara doon sa mga nasa-cite ninyong articles, blogs doon sa internet sources ninyo. Kasi doon talaga medyo problematic kasi Sir Majors, I know, mahirap kumuha ng sources during this time, pero that doesn't necessarily mean na wala na tayo mahanap online. Marami, particularly sa Chinese in the Philippines. And ano pa ba? Yeah, regarding sa title ninyo, ang title ninyo ay, sorry, I forgot the title. Pero yung sa connection ninyo sa history and tourism, medyo blurry kasi parang binigay ninyo sa reader yung problem kung paano na i-connect yung history and yung tourism. I think yun yung medyo blurry sa akin kung paano sila nagko-connect. Kung ako ay magbabasa nito at wala akong alam halimbawa sa history ng Puerto del Parian at ng Ravelin, medyo hindi ko maunawaan yung study niyo. At sa analysis part, sorry, madami talaga to. So, sa analysis part niyo, ano pa ba? Yun, yung analysis niyo nagko-contain siya ng policy ng Intramuros administration. Actually, doon nga sa hindi sa policy kundi sa role ng Intramuros administration as a social structure na mag-govern doon sa mga sites and historic sites and events, no? Pero nakulangan lang ako kung paano sa nakulangan lang ako doon sa explanation ninyo kasi on your last part parang sinabi ninyo na okay, ito yung Puerto del Parian, ito yung picture namin, pero hindi niyo ako doon nadala sa observation ninyo doon sa Puerto del Parian. Kumbaga parang biglang analysis agad. Tapos papaano ako na hindi ko pa nakita, halimbawa hindi ko pa nakita o hindi ko pa nalaman yung Puerto del Parian. Tapos yun lang. So far regarding sa sources doon sa pagiging concise ng inyong topic, paper, yung pag-magnify lang doon sa mga blurry parts ay kailangan yung i-work out pa. So, congrats pa rin sa inyong report. Thank you.
So, thank you, Sir Nico. May response ba from the group sa comment ng both panelists natin?
Ay, ako ba, sir? Doon muna pa kay Sir Bal sa mga about po dun sa na-mention niyo po kasi yung sa part po nung sa ASEAN and connection niyo po dun sa Puerto del Parian. Actually, in like the previous version of the paper po, we tried to connect the two sites and include another project besides the one that we presented, which kind of connect ASEAN with the Puerto del Parian, because we interpret ASEAN as this kind of organization that extols prosperity in the context of economy, and then peace in the context of defense, which the two factors na hina-highlight po namin sa Puerto del Parian. But it was just kind of difficult na bigyan justice yung connection, and then kung ano yung magiging project na mabubuo out of that connection. And then yun din po sa sa Chinese perspective po about dun sa Puerto del Parian. Yes, it was difficult po talaga na maghanap ng sources na magbibigay ng perspective ng mga Chinese about how Puerto del Parian became a part of their own history. And I think we were also worried po na baka baka masyadong mag-focus sa Parian yung discussion, sa Parian mismo yung discussion instead of dun sa mismo gate. That's why it's very limited. But we don't understand po na a perspective of Chinese would have added a more substance to the whole, a perspective rather dun sa buong paper.
Meron ba? Okay, so if there is none, we'll now open the floor for questions from the audience. Okay, to submit your questions, you may use the Q&A button at the bottom of our screen here in Zoom. So we have 3 questions here, all from anonymous attendees. So first question, given that there are significant events in the walled city, even way beyond the Spanish colonization, and that the constant key player in its history is the Filipino people and their resilience, do you think Intramuros should still be called Spanish City, or should it be reclaimed by the Philippines as its own?
Thank you for that question. To me po I don't think the name of the city itself is the important part of Intramuros, whether it be called the Spanish City or whether it be called a more native name. I think the history of Intramuros, there's no need for us to reclaim it as our own, because it is already our own kami. Kasi naman yung Intramuros naman hindi lang siya basta, we can see it as a symbol of colonialism, since siya yung naging capital ng Spanish colonial government and to a certain extent the Spanish American government. But I think the Filipinos, despite being subjugated by the Spanish, also played its own part in the history history of Intramuros even up to now. So I don't think changing the name would be the point of reclaiming Intramuros as our own, but rather this further study that would show how the Filipinos played their role in the history of Intramuros and how Intramuros played its role in Filipinos today.
Okay. Thank you, Seth. So second question, in line with the project raising historical awareness, what concrete steps will the project undertake to educate the general public about the events in Puerta del Parian? Do you plan to enrich tour guides with additional knowledge, provide signages, or installations about its history?
And thank you po. Yung sa project na pin-post po namin, we plan po na magkaroon ng mini lecture events na malapit sa Puerta del Parian. At yung discussion will mostly center on historical context, yung importance sa preservation na rin ng Puerta del Parian.
Okay, thank you. Last question. Due to the Puerta and Rebellion del Parian's role as a long-lasting witness to key events in the Philippines, especially Manila history, how can we make use of the said structures in studying more about our rich history or histories through means that connect the Puerta and Rebellion to broader narratives of our history?
So, and thank you for the question po. So, through tours and visits, people can show interest in enhancing their knowledge regarding the rich history of the site. So, these little narratives will serve as a bridge to the gap with the need to study the overall history or historical narratives of the walls and fortifications of Intramuros. So, this paper aims to be a start on studying more and enriching the literatures to broaden narratives of not only the Intramuros history but the national historical narrative as well. That's
Okay, thank you. And perhaps this will be the last question for this presentation. In relation to our panelists' comment to look at the significance of the site to present-day generation, one even said that the narrative is quite blurry. So how would you bridge that in the timeline of this study that stopped with the end of the war in 1945? So that's almost 7 decades ago, or 8, quite a long time. So how would you bridge that?
Sir, yung gap po ba between the Spanish colonial era up until the Second World War?
No, I
Am
mean
right po?
it's the significance of the study to the present, including the significance of the site to present day generation. Tapos yung study nyo stop with 1945, the end of the war. So how would you bridge that? Because that's quite a long time.
So yun, as per records naman po, ni-restore na lang kasi talaga yung Puerta and Rebellion del Parian after mabuo yung Intramuros administration. Therefore, records regarding the site is only available nung nagkaroon na ng archives. So yung mga gaps between the dates up until now is very blurry pa din dahil nga very little yung sources regarding these sites, the walls and fortifications of the Intramuros administration. So to answer your question, regarding na rin sa scope and the limitations ng aming paper, we were not able to tackle this kind of restoration works and other significance.
Okay, since nabanggit mo yung scope and delimitation, for everyone's information, these papers were made within 25 working days. And dahil sa pandemic, online mode nila itong ginawa. So, that short period of time. So, anyway, congratulations and thank you. Okay. Okay, so we'll now head to our last but definitely not the least presentation for this intern talk. So this is entitled My Mumu, Analyzing the Intramuros Nightwalks as a Strategic Commercialization of its Dark History. This study focuses on the Filipino cultural connection with what they call the occult or folk horror, and examine how these are strategically utilized by certain tourism activities. For this research, we have Flory Joy B. Alvarez, an undergraduate student pursuing a Bachelor of Arts in major in history at the Polytechnic University of the Philippines. She is one of the sought-after guest speakers by student organizations and by university councils, giving emphasis on the importance of Philippine social realities and their history. Her interest in history focuses more on contemporary issues and Filipinos' advancement in the Philippine Revolution and class struggle, because she has been devoting her years in PUP as a student leader and activist. She was able to be awarded both national and international because of her community development initiative through the organization that she founded, which is the Anluwagi Project. She is also the Asian Girl Ambassador 2017, advancing the fight for women's rights and gender violence, representing girls in Asia to different countries around the world. Right now, she serves as the CSSD Student Council President, campaigning about the Ligtas na Balik Eskwela, defend academic freedom, and no to historical revisionism. She dreams of becoming a human rights lawyer someday. Bianca Luis Delgado is an undergraduate student taking a Bachelor of Arts in History at the Polytechnic University of the Philippines, Manila. Their interests in history are art history, natural history, pre-16th century Philippines, pop culture history, and local history. Among their past papers covered topics of bladed weaponry in Southeast Asia and Manila's urban planning in the American colonial period. Oops. Laila Denise E. Rontos is an undergraduate student at the Polytechnic University of the Philippines, Manila, taking up a Bachelor of Arts in History. They are also active in the Committee on Arbitration and Constitutional Amendments of the Samahan ng Mag-aaral ng Kasaysayan. Their interests include the colonial history of the Philippines, the education of Filipinas in the late 19th and early 20th century, and early Islamic and Southeast Asian civilizations. Some of their past papers cover the impact of American educational reforms on the education of Filipinas, the examination of the Buddhist temples of Java, Indonesia, and the age of space exploration during the Cold War. And Maria Angelica Rosita, an undergraduate student of Polytechnic University of the Philippines, taking up Bachelor of Arts in History with an unwavering pursuit for knowledge and determination to make a difference in their community. Their passion in studying the arts in the past had motivated them to serve in different organizations and had influenced them to take up the challenge in studying under a course stigmatized by society. During this academic year, they are currently one of the counselors of the College of Social Sciences and Development Student Council and the head of Educational Research and Training Committee. Their interest in empowering knowledge and enlightenment of those around them reaches no boundaries as they continue to serve as the co-chairperson of the Anluwagi Project's Education and Advocacy Working Committee. Alongside both affiliations centered in education, they are also driven in upholding women's rights and empowerment, as she used to be Gabriela Youth PUP Secretary General for External Affairs and BMI Officer for the past 2 years of serving the organization. They love to teach and share the knowledge they obtain while learning from their peers and teachers, and will continue to dedicate their life to the improvement of the nation they hold dear the most. So without further ado, I give the floor to our interns.
So hello, good afternoon to you everyone, especially to both our panelists and to everyone participating here in our Intern Talks second session for today. So I am Maria Angelica Tiercita, the first presenter of our paper, My Mumu, Analyzing the Intramuros Nightwalks as a Strategic Commercialization of its Dark History. A brief background of our study: Filipinos have been strong believers in occult or folk horror as it revolves in the culture that has been retained from their indigenous roots. The strong connection of the past that still echoes in the present has led to the rise of gimmicks or events that highly emphasizes this belief. Many had participated and also indulged in such activities that it had produced different varieties of which we can enjoy today as tourists or as locals in different historical sites. Intramuros is also full of dark history. Despite being a bustling area full of Persians and products shipped in and out of the country during the earlier Spanish colonization, the walled city had also experienced such an egregious past. Countless lives were buried and have forgotten as the war had taken place. Acts of atrocities have been prevalent, as well as the exploitation of both land and people. There are a lot of narratives lost amidst the beauty that the walled city provides for those who visit the area. But having such history, one must wonder how can this be enjoyed and learned by many in a ways that can gather their attention. Thus, we would like to introduce to you our topic that focuses more on the Intramuros night walk tours as a means of a culture for development. So Intramuros is always known for its great aesthetic and historical infrastructures. You would often see a lot of people taking a lot of photos and also posting it on different social media platforms. It is a way in trying to build up an engagement and also developing the mindset of a lot of people to visit the area. But there has been but that mindset itself does lack the idea of what Intramuros must uphold since it is indeed full of history. And most of the places there, even though they were reconstructed or restored, it still holds a lot of importance, and one must have a deeper understanding within the whole city. So regarding to the Intramuros night walk tours, so we often experience different types of tours during the day, but they mostly focuses more on night. And the Intramuros night walk tours would be expounded later on as we would also introduce the idea of using night tours as a way in gathering engagement from different types of people. So every door is an opportunity for workers of artifacts to share their stories, as Guman in 2020 has stated. To be fascinated with the Intramuros' remarkable history, travel agencies and other tourism institutions would launch the night walking tours, wherein tourists are guided around the whole city, along with tour guides who share urban legends. That entirely focuses more on the folk horror that has been prevalent in this study. So every tour is a constant reminder of faith because prayer has been practiced at the end of the tour, as been stated by a lot of those tourists who had posted their experiences in engaging such night walk tours. Next slide, please. So our study would then sought to answer the following questions. So in what way does the incorporation of the culture of folk horror and night walk tours become a way to commercialize the dark history of Intramuros? How does this engage tourists to visit the place? Then, what are the factors contributed by the Intramuros night tours in terms of commercialization by culture? And how does the Intramuros night walk tours aid in establishing a deeper understanding of the dark history of the whole city in terms of its strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats? Thus, this would lead to our main primary objectives. That will be expounded later on in our findings. First is to examine how these travel agencies or institutions utilize these occurrences to commercialize Intramuros as a tourist spot. Then to give life on the use of various tours in Intramuros as a way to educate people about the history of the whole city. And lastly, to explore the importance of folk horror and folk Catholicism and its preservation of the culture and identity of Intramuros. This study will mostly focus on analyzing the night walking tours itself as a way of using it as a strategy to gather such engagement that will lead later on for such developments. The developments would be various regarding to how the people themselves have learned from their tours or the experiences that they have actually have gathered and have shared in different social media platforms. And also, what are the contributing factors that had led to such engagement because of the use of folk horror or folk Catholicism? And this study will also be limited in determining the impact of night walking tours and understanding the importance of Intramuros and how this activity affects its tourism. The gathering of data has been an issue for our part since we only focus more on online posts, articles, interviews, and focus on group discussions in the Intramuros night walk tours that has been available online since we ourselves can experience the night walk tours for various reasons, and also the short time period in conducting this research. So at the end, we decided to use a more statistical approach in order to fully contribute a new insight regarding to the use of night walk tours as a way of commercializing the history of Intramuros itself. Next slide. The next part will then be explained by my other group member, Miss Denise Rondas.
So to further support our paper, we used the project of UNESCO called the Culture for Development Indicators Project, which they researched the 7 dimensions that would consider how culture affects the development of low to middle income countries. So in these 7 dimensions, economy, education, governments, social participation, gender equality, communication, and heritage, we considered the economy aspect, the social participation, and the heritage indicators that they have considered. We sort of took inspiration or lifted the concept from this manual to further strengthen our paper. And then the next is that in terms of culture and tourism, Greg Richards, in his perspective paper from 2019, argued that culture and tourism has been always at odds since he further established his point from his 2010 paper called Tourism Development Trajectories from Culture to Creativity, that he established that cultural tourism focuses more on at the time, cultural tourism focused more on being commercialized, that it was all too overcrowded, and that it degraded the culture of the place that he studied. Now, from these observations, he suggested that the program of creative tourism, where it is more small scaled, more engaging for the locals and the tourists themselves. So the results is this engagement develops the knowledge of the tourists and the development of the local residents and the place that they are visiting. Next.
So next is the in the tourism sector. So we have gathered some sources to further strengthen on this topic, which is here we have the paranormal tourism, which is a niche sector of tourism. It presents an opportunity to attract tourists through the focus of paranormal phenomena. So these kind of people were the kind of whether be thrill seekers or curious. And what drives the motivation of these tourists to engage in paranormal tourism is the authenticity driven by their views of religious destinations. So ghost tours differ and share aspects of mainstream tourism. With historical background, it becomes a crucial component of these tours through the use of storytelling in the narratives of the haunting. With the shared commonality between the tourists and guides, it highlights the freedom of space and in-depth information. And with the combination of aspects of sightseeing, entertainment, and escapism, the tourists exhibit the interest in presentation of historical information. Next is the problem with the standard tours, which is the typical tour guiding, which is it happens to be short. The narratives tend to be disconnected instead of being cohesive and interwoven into a seamless narrative. And the tendency to homogenize heritage tourism into something that is easy to consume. However, these elements are not always restricted, but rather when creativity is applied, a new point of view is created.
So to further conclude the aspect of tourism, most of the works that we have presented does share the same variables that are influenced by what the consumer so desires. So the influence of what the consumer desires, as been stated, as a way of using creativity, really does promote such engagement from those people. I'm sorry, you still have another part. Okay, please do continue.
So through the guided tours, the storytelling becomes meaningful as to weave stories through emotions and contextualization. So even though the internet exists, the information can be accessed within few taps and typings of our fingers, but then again, it doesn't capture the feeling of being there, that even though the web page happens to be detailed, really detailed, there's photos, there's information that has been gathered through various sources, it can never capture the performance of the tour guide. So it is from the tour guides, it is up to them what stories they were to include, what they will narrate towards the tourists, whether that be local or international, and they serve as mediators to local histories and how they localize to these tourists. And so tour guides contribute to the marketing and promotion to this kind of tour, in which the involvement of the tourists through communications between them and the tour guide makes the experience enjoyable. So in that case, it allows the freedom of communication. They tourists can allow themselves to share some stories relating to the ghost tours or whatever what they know of certain kind of place, or similar occurrences, in which it makes these experiences much more enjoyable and much more it makes it as if a promotion of this kind of tourism.
So basing from the discussion presented by two of my group mates that focuses more on the culture as a means for development, and also the concept of tourism that entirely has more questionable aspects regarding to its authenticity, but it does promote such engagement and also gather the attention of such individuals in order to fully enjoy the tour, we have arrived to our theoretical framework. So basing from the figure presented in the screen, Intramuros administration and the tour agencies are the main actors of such tourism that happens within Intramuros itself. So by using the tours that they have presented, and also by promoting dark history, and also by conserving it as the main agencies that upholds the essence of Intramuros, we will use the proponents that has been suggested by UNESCO, wherein culture as a means for development that would lead to three different stages. Basing from the actual chart itself, they have presented promotion, and that promotion, and then it enables a certain aspect and also does produce results. So the three aspects underneath are interconnected with one another. First off is promotes a perspective on the dark past behind the walls, because the essence of tourism is to promote such history in a way that is enjoyed or consumed by different types of people. Then it also enables tours that improves public engagement. Then it results in more historical awareness and also profound national identity, especially to those who have experienced the night walk tours itself. Next slide, please. Thus, we had lead to a more statistical analysis on the use of culture as a means for development that focuses on commercialization, the culture itself, the SWOT analysis, and also the certain demographics that has its own contribution to show that there is a certain connection of using culture that indeed promotes and develops the historical awareness and also the engagement of such people.
Okay. Hello, everyone. I'm Flory J. Alvarez, one of the intern and also one of the researcher for this group. We all know that despite the fact that we have been colonized and many of us are already Christians or belong to the biggest group of Christian, which are Catholic, we still went to our own identity as Filipino, believing in spirits. Maybe that's the reason why we derive with this kind of narrative and also research. So with that, with the kind of timeline that was given to us. We have to really extend our selves to gather more information and data. The reason why we have this kind of study, because we wanted to know the result effectively or in an objective way. So we really use the quantitative kind of research. So our research design is descriptive method, but in correlative research, in a way that the assumption is if a tourist know the dark history, it means that there is commercialization, because there is an effectivity within night tours in Intramuros. And also we have the SWOT analysis as our instrumentation, because SWOT analysis is a process or instrumentation used in order to gain knowledge about the external and internal situation of a process, which is the Intramuros night tours. So we wanted to know that deeply. We also have a sampling technique called the random sampling, because we wanted to have a bigger scope of respondents, wherein our respondents are chosen entirely by chance or a certain population, but the only thing that we have is that they have to have the experience of Intramuros night walks. The gathering data procedure is that one of the highlight is that we have to have 6 to 12 respondents, because according to guest et al. Publication, if a research would use 6 to 12 respondents, it is already equivalent to a saturated data of a research. And then we also have a validation of our instrument, the reason why there is an effectiveness in the verbal interpretation. So those respondents, we give them a questionnaire, or wherein they have the 5 as the most effective and 1 as the least. And then there they would know if those factors are effective on the commercialization or the culture aspect of the Intramuros night tours. So first, we have the commercialization. The very reason why we separate it to commercialization and to the culture first is that how is the tourists we're able to be attracted with the Intramuros night tour. So we have here the publication materials with a grand mean of 4, and the effectiveness is effective, and the verbal interpretation is highly utilized. Payment, fees, and expenses 3.7, slightly effective, highly utilized. Travel agency 4.30, effective also is the effectiveness, and verbal interpretation is very highly utilized. Tour guides 4.50, effective and very highly utilized is the verbal interpretation. And activities in the tour is very effective and very highly utilized. With the kind of data that we have, the overall grand mean of the degree of adaptability to the effectiveness of the Intramuros night tours in terms of commercialization as a whole was 4.30. As reflected to the table, this overall grand mean implies that the respondent cover in this study had a very highly utilized effect on the Intramuros night walk tours as commercialization. The table revealed that the factors like publication materials, advertisement, travel agencies, and tour guides have effective way of engaging tours on the Intramuros night tours. This factor indicate an effective and very utilized verbal interpretation. The highest mean was 5, which is the activities in the tourist event in the Intramuros night tours, with a very effective remarks and a verbal interpretation of very highly utilized. And the least mean is the payment, fees, and expenses, which is 3.70 and slightly effective remarks. Next slide po. Ayan. So next we go on the culture. After having the Intramuros night tours, is there an effect, or are there thoughts that changes when they have the Intramuros night tours? So we have this factor, the sense of Filipinism, horror stories shared, spiritual faith, religious belief, understanding the essence of the tour, and sharing of information not found in books. So if we can see here, sense of Filipinism, we have a mean of 3.50 with effectiveness of slightly effective and verbal interpretation of highly utilized. Horror story shared 4.80 with effectiveness of effective effective, very highly utilized. Spiritual faith, religious belief, 4.30, with an effectiveness of effective, and verbal interpretation of very highly utilized. Understanding the essence of the tour, 4.20, with effectiveness of effective and verbal interpretation of highly utilized, and sharing of information not found in books, which is 4.30, with effective and very highly utilized. If you could see here on the table, the overall grand mean of the degree of adaptability to the effectiveness of the Intramuros night tours in terms of culture as a whole was 4.20, as reflected to the table. And this overall grand mean implies that the respondent covered in this study had a highly utilized effect on the Intramuros night tours in terms of culture, and it remains effective. The table revealed that the factors like horror stories shared, like the spiritual faith or religious beliefs, because every time we have read the answers of or the experiences of the respondents, they would always share how the Intramuros night walks would end with a prayer. So we have this spiritual faith and religious beliefs, and also understanding the essence of the tour and sharing unpopular stories not found in books. It all has an effective way in utilizing Intramuros night walks in nurturing the culture awareness of the tourists. This factor indicate an effective in terms of effectiveness, and the highest mean in this is 4.80, which is the horror story shared in the tour, and also it is very highly utilized, while the least mean, on the other hand, is the identity of being a Filipino or sense of Filipinism with 3.50 and slightly effective remarks. So that is our table for that. Next slide po. So if we have here the reasons why we chose this one. So yung what we did is that we used the SWOT analysis. Like what I said, SWOT analysis is used in order to know the external and the internal process of an organization or a process itself. So in the strength of Intramuros night walks, we have the publication materials and advertisement helps in disseminating the information about the Intramuros night walks. This is helpful for tourists because they will be updated with the information about the program. It is considered a strength because it makes Filipino tourists closer in knowing the dark history of Intramuros. While the tour guides are considered a strength because they will be efficient in helping and guiding the Filipino tourists in the routes of the tour. Aside from that, the Intramuros night tours are aided with tour guides who have in-depth knowledge with Intramuros dark history. In fact, some of the respondents would say that they would have paranormal expert with them or other historical personnel who know more or who have depth knowledge about Intramuros. The activities in the tours are very well written in the publication materials or the inclusion of the tours provided by the travel agency. This gives the tourists a brief understanding on what they will be experiencing in the tours. Aside from that, important site and infrastructure in the whole city are exhausted in activity of the Intramuros night walk tours, because the Intramuros night walk tour activity would always be on the infrastructures, and they would have a trail and activities or any kind of performance on what they are going to do to the whole duration. And these activities differ in every Intramuros night walks a travel agency would have. Next slide po. The weaknesses of the Intramuros night walk tours is the sense of identity and Filipinism among the Filipino tourists. As what we recalled on the table, which was answered by the respondent, some of the most lacking or weak features of the Intramuros night walking tours is that given the site chosen for the activity is colonized and some of the important stories and narrative focus more on the foreign perspective, the dark history of Intramuros focus on the deaths, exploitation, torture, etc., which made tourists question why natives or our ancestors needed to suffer that way. And next is the understanding the essence of tour is effective but still needs a clear narration and the glimpse of what emotions a tourist had to feel after knowing the dark history of Intramuros. Through it, though it is easy to impose its essence, it will not only be shown or materialize through the action made by the Filipino tourists, whether they invite more to join the tour or share it, because it is a weakness because we have no control about it. It will only be on the control of the tourists whether they invite people or not. It means that the spread of information that Intramuros or travel agency would have Intramuros night walking tours would be on that dissemination platform, which is not really on our end or control. It is still considered as a weakness because Intramuros night tours does not have the control with regards to this. So next slide. Opportunities of Intramuros night walking tours. Travel agencies became a vital platform in the commercialization of Intramuros night walks. Aside from the fact that they were able to give a series of events every night, the travel agency was able to provide a platform and opportunities in understanding Intramuros dark history. Because we know that when we hear the word Intramuros night walking tours, we became interested of what it is all about, the reason why it is really very effective, and it is an opportunity to learn more about our dark history as Filipinos in connection with the Intramuros. Next is horror stories like war, prominent people, and behind stories of infrastructure shared in the tours serves as an opportunity because tourist guides and experts were able to knit this story together in providing a clear storytelling of Intramuros dark history, which is the main point of our study. After every night tour, a prayer is done to recognize the essence of faith and its spiritual beliefs. This manifests how Filipino, even being involved in horror or ghost stories, still understand the essence of faith, which is part of our own culture. The activity uplifts the morale of spirit believers. And last is sharing unpopular stories not found in books, give opportunities for Filipino tourists to embrace Intramuros dark history. Through this narration, they will have a clear and insightful understanding of this, only limited when they join the tour. It helps other people be interested with the Intramuros night tours too, because they would have a mindset that if we go on this tour, we will have the information which is only limited to certain people. So it would also arise interest. Next slide. So the threats that we can see in the Intramuros night tour is one of the threats experienced by Filipino tourists is how expensive and spendy an Intramuros night tours will cost. Also, aside from the tour fee, the tourists needed to prepare for food and other expenses for the trip. It makes the night tour limited for Filipino tourists to try the tour because it's really expensive, and with the kind of situations that we have today, we will just be spending the money to important needs rather than joining Intramuros night tour. So here is the concise and also the brief and the like all the narration about our SWOT analysis in the Intramuros night walking tours. Next slide, please. There, and also I would like to share that the strength of our paper is that it is still accepted up to this day, to the point that we will be able to encourage more tourists or Filipinos to try Intramuros night walking tours. So it would be a very good platform for Filipinos to know that there are Intramuros night walking tours happening in the walled city. So I give the floor to Angelica.
So as a final part of our findings, we would also like to emphasize the demographic of the tourists that have arrived, especially during the year 2022, since as the rise of COVID pandemic had struck the Philippines around March 2020, numerous establishments and institutions either halted their normal transactions or adopted the protocols implemented by the government in strict compliance. Thus, there are a lot of museums, which compose of 90% around the world, have closed, since it is a way of trying to minimize the spread of COVID to different types of people, since a lot of museums and also different historical sites requires the actual physical presence of a certain individual. But after lifting most of the COVID pandemic protocols with NCR under alert level 2, they opened once again the Intramuros After Dark Facebook page and had started once more their Intramuros night walk tours around February 22. Basing from the data presented by the by the Intramuros administration themselves, there is a certain rise of tourists visited the place that 138% in the month of February have been achieved, basing from how much there has been a lack of tourists because of the strict COVID pandemic implementations and protocols. So contributing to that, the numbers continues to rise with each passing month, especially in April, since from March there has been around 44,000 individuals that had been present in Fort Santiago and other places as well. So to round off the entirety of the tourists that had visited the area, there is roughly 107,019 tourists that have arrived in March. But if you were to actually look at the data afterwards, especially in April, there is a very large rise of tourists since there is roughly 555,617 tourists that have arrived. So it's more than half of the expected number of tourists to actually be back once more in Intramuros itself. So there is a certain event that happens around in April that is entirely focused also in the folk Catholic belief of Filipinos, since it is the month of Holy Week, and as has been introduced in the Intramuros After Dark Facebook page, they had started their own Chinese Ghost Month event as also a way of starting a new type of tour with the other tourists. And then there's also other engagement that focuses more on the folk horror that indeed garnered them 1,000 reactions from different types of people and insights on their Facebook page. So the demographics that has been shown in that data really does show that the culture revolving around the folk Catholic beliefs of people contributes more on the actual engagement of those people itself. Besides from the opening once more of Intramuros in tourists, the event itself, especially in the Chinese Ghost Month that had recently happened and also Holy Week, it contributed more as a way for those people to engage or participate in such tours. And it has been prevalent in our overall study. Next slide, please. So to conclude our study, there's a variety of ways one can explore and enjoy the narratives of the past contained in infrastructures, artifacts, lands, and people. As to what UNESCO had given on their post-2015 UN Development Agenda, the innovation and how culture is an agent for development suggests a variety that one can simply dismiss. And that culture is a very key proponent as to how a person can fully relate themselves and also to have themselves engage directly to those said events that not either just give them such satisfaction, but also as a means for development within the area that they are directly participating in. It has been provided growth and tourism within the walled city by indeed utilizing the prevalent folk Catholic beliefs that the tourists have, and had also been a method in inculcating the dark history the place holds to those who consume the said tours. Although there is the idea of exclusivity, since not everyone does have the privilege to participate in Intramuros nightwalk tours because of its fee, and also since it often happens at night and a lot of people doesn't really live near around Metro Manila, there is still a lot of improvements that may happen or may be contributed in the idea of creating new ways for people to actually engage themselves or participate in touring around different historical sites. Next slide. So the researchers of this study recommends that the Intramuros nightwalk tours to start off, the Intramuros nightwalk tours indeed had played an important role in enlivening and developing a deeper grasp on the history of the whole city, especially to those who had experienced the said tour themselves. As we have said and also have gathered based from the different posts of individuals and also thinking of the socioeconomic status of people who often frequents the place, there is indeed the idea of exclusivity, and not everyone really can participate in such tours. Given the current situation of most Filipinos, this is not entirely available for everyone. Thus, the concept of availability must be according to the social demographic of who frequently visits Intramuros. Since the Intramuros Nightwalk tours specifically have a small group of individuals, by utilizing such tours and by trying to give more engagement and also by trying to make it more inclusive, it does contribute more to the development that we so desire in trying to have a lot of Filipinos in trying to have those Filipinos have a deeper understanding and also their awareness in what really did happen in Intramuros. That it's not just entirely focused on its aesthetics or the buildings that we often see as we frequent around Metro Manila. It is also important to build bridges or connections that can aid in the interests of people, not just for the sake of compliance or upholding such moralities when it comes to our history. History in itself will always be preserved and also be taught as it is, but there should be a new way for us to gather those engagement and interests of a lot of people. So by trying to develop the interests of people, by trying to see what really does have them interested in certain things, and by trying to connect it with history, it will provide more engagement or enjoyment itself from locals in trying to learn more and study about the history itself, especially to what had happened in Intramuros. Because it is not just about the glamour or the beautiful infrastructures or the Instagram worthy pictures that we can actually take within the area, but the history in itself and the stories within the walls and also the lives that have been lost and have been since then forgotten must be upholded as we traverse the whole area. Then that ends our presentation. Thank you.
Hey, thank you for your presentations. Okay, we'll now proceed to the panel discussion again. This time we'll start with Sir Nikko and then followed by Sir Jobal. Okay, Sir Nikko?
Hi, okay. Thank you, Sir Kataan. Okay. Regarding sa paper ninyo, yeah. Wait. Before I proceed doon sa mga recommendations ko pa, congratulations doon sa inyong paper kasi you really utilized yung decent framework analysis yung SWOT, no? Tapos, yeah, despite the challenges, you were able to present or to gather no, yung data, however small yung data ninyo, but in all, okay naman siya. Yun nga lang, regarding dun sa dark history, medyo nakulangan na ako sa context ng dark history. Ano ba siya? Dahil ba mayroong series of death and wars doon sa Intramuros, kaya siya tinawag na dark history, or baka meron pa kayong ibig sabihin dyan. So, yun lang. Tapos, hindi nyo rin medyo nabigay yung examples ng dark horror or yung folk horror doon sa Intramuros. Medyo naghanap lang ako ng ano kayang kwento doon sa ano. Sudden clearance doon. Yun lang. Sa context, sa definition at saka doon sa examples ng dark horror, ng dark history tsaka yung folk horror, kasi sa folk Catholicism, medyo lagyan nyo lang siguro ng transition on that. So far, yun. Tapos sa framework niyo sa may sa may aspect ng framework, nag-mention kayo ng sociological identity doon. Yet hindi medyo, pero wala akong nakitang sociological identity doon sa paper niyo. You might want to omit na lang yung part ng sociological niyo. And yun lang. Congrats ulit sa inyo and yeah. Thank you.
Thank you po, sir.
Thank you, Sir Nikko. Sir Jobal?
Hello, good afternoon. Okay, so una congratulations sa team, no. So ito talagang mas tourism, no. Ang dating, and coming from LGU perspective, we welcome this kind of studies, no. Actually, pwede niyo itong isaling ipaggawin niyo yung research ninyo, no. Then merong contest yung Association of Tourism Officers, no. Mga tourism related na researches. So magandang pwede nyo i-develop ito at isali doon, no? Ang tanong ko, may tanong pala ako, sorry, hindi ko masyadong balikan yung, kasi tinitingnan ko siya as a program, no? As a tourism project. Ito ba existing sa ngayon? Gumagana pa o parang special ano lang siya? Special program lang siya? Kapag November 1, or ito yung regular, yung ganitong klaseng tours, night tours? Can anyone answer?
Sir, to fully introduce Intramuros Night Walk Tours po, it originated around 2018, and yung mismong mga events po nila, hindi po sila entirely limited lang within certain events po na nagpo-focus nga po sa folk Catholic beliefs ng mga tao. Constantly po siyang nangyayari kada buwan. Basing po din sa mga Facebook post po nila noong February, consistent po silang nag-release ng mga tours kada month, and also nagpa-provide po sila ng mga different schedules na available sa mga tao. Mostly
So,
nagaganap yun during weekend.
Consistent pero hindi regular. Parang idea ko, ano ba to, every weekend o every night o depende sa kung mag-post lang sila o hindi?
Padalas po sila every weekend, tapos sa gabi po talaga nagaganap.
Oo nga, syempre night tours nga eh. Pero yung sabihin ko yung halimbawa every week, regular ba? Kasi di ba kailangan kapag tourism program ito, ano to, yung may regularity. Kasi hindi pa pwedeng pag trip lang nila.
Hello.
Okay, actually today they have Intramuros night. Then question, sino yung sila? Is it Intramuros administration?
Hello, sir.
Sino yung nag-run ng tour?
Hello, sir. Okay. So, mga travel agencies po, sir, from different parts of or near Intramuros, sir, yung nag-create ng Intramuros Night Tour. So, bali po siya, sir. Nakadepende rin siya, sir, sa kung magre-release sila or hindi. Given na nasa pandemic tayo, sir, at kung ano, sir, yung mga alert levels. Yun, kunwari, sir, yung alert levels, sir, makakapag-release sila agad. Kaya po, sir, hindi talaga siya monthly or di kaya weekly. Parang depende talaga, sir, sa travel agency, kung sino man yun. At marami talaga, sir, na travel agency at marami ding klase ng Intramuros Night Tours po.
Yun, actually, yun kasi yung parang, tinitingnan ko siya as yung operation niya, di ba? So, sa ngayon, kanya-kanya, wala silang association, walang kumbaga nagma-manage. And even IA, anong participation ng IA? Allowed lang sila mag-conduct ng night tours.
Hello, sir. Ayun po.
Yes.
Bali ang alam lang po namin, sir, as researchers, sir, ay parang initiative po kasi to and hiwalay po siya, sir, sa IA. So nagpapaalam lang po sila sa Intramuros if ever they are allowed to do or perform the Intramuros night tours. Pero ano siya, sir, initiative talaga siya ng mga travel agency po.
Ayun, yun lang kasi yung part na nakulangan ako, yung operations, no? Paano to nag-ooperate, sino nag-ooperate, anong role dito ng LGU, kung meron man, o anong role dito ng IA, kasi kailangan maintindihan natin siya as a tourism program, paano siya nag-ooperate. Kasi syempre, may mga issues dyan ng accountability, paano kung halimbawa may safety and security concern. Kasi gabi, di ba? So, of course, alam natin na very professional ang IA na talagang tinitingnan din nila yung safety nung pero syempre mga ruins itong may mga parts sa mga bato-bato, 'di ba? May mga 'di ba? May mga pwedeng aksidente or what, 'di ba? So kasi iba yung operation sa araw, iba yung operation sa gabi, 'di ba? So yun yung parang part na suggestion ko ay i-work out pa yung operation aspect, no? And then makita natin sa operation ano yung role ng bawat stakeholder, di ba? Ayun. And then aside from operations, no, number 2 ay medyo dalawang terms yung lumulutang, yung dark history at saka yung commercialization, no. Actually yung dark history, medyo maganda yung flavor, additional flavor siya sa Intramuros. Of course, we know Intramuros as heritage, history, culture, di ba? At the same time, 'di ba? Ano nga siya ng tawag dito ng war, no? Laging connected ang discussion ng World War II sa Intramuros din. At kasama niyan ay yung mga kwento nga ng mga namatay, no? So, kumbaga maganda siya kasi nagkakaroon ng additional sa portfolio o parang additional na experience, no, sa usual na offerings ng Intramuros, no. Although yung dark history not necessarily naman after dark kasi even daytime you can talk about the dark history, di ba? Pero of course iba yung experience ng araw sa experience sa gabi. So at the same time mula doon sa manabasa ko mukhang may market naman, no. Kaya maganda siyang idagdag, no. Kasi sa tourism program napaka iba talaga yung may yung diverse yung offerings, no. Nakakatulong siya sa sustainability. So yun nabanggit naman na kanina medyo konting dagdag na ano lang discussion about dark history. Ang hindi ko lang nakita na medyo nakulangan ako yun nga yung discussion sa content, no. Saan papunta yung kwento? Pananakot lang ba siya, di ba? Although sabi nga ninyo may mga ritual, may prayers, no, may mga ganung part, di ba? Pero how can we, I don't want to say naman na control, pero how can we check doon sa content, no, ng tours na ito? Kasi hindi ko pa to na experience no. So parang can we also explore, tingnan din natin yung content din. So ito ba ay ang dulo ba nito hatred, parang ganon. O kasi nga 'di ba yung mga nagbumulto mga hindi pa sila nabigyan ng justice, 'di ba? Parang mga ganon. So up to what saan papunta yung kwento ng horror? Para siyang pelikulang horror 'di ba? Ayun.
Hello, sir. Ayun po. Actually, sir, we really appreciate all the suggestion and I think we could work on that as a researcher. Pero po yung siguro po kaya rin po naging limited po yung information na binibigay namin tungkol sa content ng horror stories is because our paper focus more on the commercialization po of the Intramuros night tours and is it effective? Mas ganun lang po yung pagtanaw namin doon. Kaya po medyo limited po siya. Pero at least po now, we have a brief review na pwede pala po kaming magdagdag. Akala po kasi namin, limited lang po kami sa ganung scope. Kaya medyo natakot din po kami as researcher kung idadagdag po namin yung mga information katulad sa kung ano ba yung kanikwento nila sa loob or what, ganyan po. Kasi
kahit
po,
review lang, kasi sa akin, may kinalaman din yung content para doon sa commercialization. Kasi kung maganda yung content niya na talagang appealing, 'di ba? It will create a sustained market, 'di ba? Aside dun sa may iba kasi experience lang na yung 'di ba, yung makapunta doon ng gabi, 'di ba, etc. So, actually papunta na ako sa third point is yung commercialization. Medyo although alam naman talaga natin commercialization is yung may profit, no, profit oriented, kikita, no, which is important, no, economic ito no. Ito yung talagang kailangan ng heritage sites yung economic aspect ng para maging sustainable, no, at magkaroon ng impact doon sa community o sa stakeholders. Kaya lang hindi ko lang kung ako lang ito, no, pero baka makahanap kayo ng better word for commercialization kasi parang loaded, may baggage yung commercialization na ano siya, maganda yung point pero parang medyo may bagahe nga yung commercialization. Baka makaisip kayo ng better term, no. Of course we mean the same naman, di ba? Kasi it's totoo lang talaga dapat ay napapakinabangan may financial ding balik, no, yung at ito nga yung kaya ang tourism may economic sector, pareho siyang economic and social kasi sa social syempre we create social heritage awareness, etc. But at the same time, di ba, importante na may contribution siya sa ekonomiya, no. So yun din naman yun, pero yun nga, no, suggestion ko lang, isip pa tayo ng better word, no. Although ako lang to, baka sa iba naman ay hindi nila issue, no. Kasi nga 'di ba parang may perspective na yung kino-commercialize, no. Which is dapat naman kasi kailangan kumita, pero may ano siya, 'di ba, negative na dating.
Ayun, sir. Ayun.
Oo.
Thank you, sir.
O medyo
Thank you.
umuulit na ako doon. Tapos eventually kung yan din yung tingin ninyo, kung part ng inyong data sana, try lang ha, malaman kung magkano bang kinikita. Kasi kailangan natin ng data ng kahit range or estimate, 'di ba parang ganun. Pero at least lang meron tayong baseline data at nalalaman natin magkano bang kinikita ng night tour market. No, hindi naman siguro sa purposes ng tax, no? Pero sa purposes lang na malaman natin yung kanyang ambag sa ekonomiya, 'di ba? Ayun, baka sakali lang na makaisipin ng paraan to also 'di ba, source data, no, sa kita aspect, no.
Siguro po na, sir, na, ayun po, bago po si Angge siguro, nalimitihan din po kami, sir, dun sa part na, ang tinatanong lang, ang alam po lang kasi namin, ang presyo po, for example, 700 per head, ganyan. Pero po, hindi po kasi, nahihirapan po kasi kami sa data privacy, sir, na respondent in a sense na baka hindi po sila willing i-disclose kung magkano po yung mga ganong bagay. Kaya po,
Oo.
may sensitivity po yung ganon. And in terms naman po of commercialization, sir, yung research po kasi namin, sir, hindi talaga siya on the thought of romanticizing din and all. Kaya we just present it the way it is and allow the viewers to perceive it kung ano po talaga siya. Kaya nga po kahit na gusto man nating i-highlight na yung Intramuros Night Tours dahil nakalagay sa data namin na isang kahinaan yung expenses or yung pera or di kaya yung bigat niya, talaga pong present po namin para po magkaroon ng glimpse yung mga individuals na nakikinig or di kaya naman po yung mga visitors or tours na interested na mahal talaga siya at yun yung kahinaan niya. Siguro maganda rin po yung paper na challenge din sa mga local government unit or di kaya sa mga institution na magpa-perform ito na libre or di kaya naman reachable sa lahat ng klase ng audience.
Sige. Pero pag ganitong aspect na insist ko talaga kasi, ang hanapin ko talaga sana may data tayo on dun sa kasi yung economics ng heritage, parang ang inisip natin sa heritage sa katulad nito puro gasto kasi mahal talaga yung mga conservation, yung promotion. So sana medyo nakikita rin natin magkano yung pumapasok, bumabalik sa community, no. At the same time also itanong, sabi mo ano ito, no, mga gusto kong makita kasi gusto ko rin makita rito yung arrangement ng IA, yung paano nagkakatulungan yung IA at yung mga tour operators na ito, 'di ba? Tapos ilang tour operators ba tong mga involved, 'di ba? Dahil sabi mo nga wala pa silang parang ang intindi ko Facebook group lang, mga Facebook post lang yung basis, no? Wala pa talagang parang ano ba? Entity or talagang ito yung business nila o kanya-kanyang pa-night tour ng mga tour operator. So yung natanong ko na kanina to part ng operations, but I think that will also contribute, no, to in analyzing the viewing this project, no, kasi sabi nga natin kanina, a welcome development ito sa Intramuros because nakadadagdag siya ng new experience, no. Pero kasi sa side ng Intramuros, meron din yang institutional na 'di ba na changes or adjustments on them kasi 'di ba ang government ang Intramuros, so usually 8 to 5 yan. So pag magagabi, it will mean additional tao, 'di ba? And additional security or what. I mean, 'di ba? So ano rin 'yun, meron din yung kumbaga impact sa kanilang budget, 'di ba? So kung ito yung magiging mas regular, 'di ba? Pero yung mga ganun naman ay sa tingin ko IA will also pag nakita nila yung value nito at yung additional na increase nito sa arrival sa Intramuros sa mga turista, and that will also, I think they will also consider 'di ba, adding more people no. Ayun. So yun, maganda yung potential ng paper, no, at dito makikita ninyo na as history majors or researchers, no, hindi lang tayo pang archives, no, hindi na tayo pang library, no, tayo rin ay meron din tayong bahagi sa ekonomiya, no, at maganda na nabubuksan ito Eventually naman, sabi naman natin, kapag ito ay nakatulong sa mga tour operators, no, sa mga tour guides, no, ay nakakatulong din tayo sa ekonomiya. So yun, maraming salamat at sana ay dahil sa inyong presentation nasa bucket list ko ang pag night tour sa Intramuros. Thank you.
Sure,
Thank
you.
you, Sir Jobal. May sasabihin yata si Angelica.
Sure, ano po, additional din po dun sa sinabi ni Flory, naging kahinaan din po kasi namin yung pagpapaabot nga po dun sa mismong night walk tours na Intramuros. Although they work directly sa mga protocols and also sa mga restrictions na nire-release ng mismong ng Intramuros administration. Pero we as researchers po, basing po dun sa past occurrences nga po habang ginagawa namin yung study, iisa lang po sa amin yung malapit sa Intramuros para po makapunta dun mismo sa lugar. So, layo po namin sa isa't isa. So, there is also, ayun na po, naging issue na rin po namin kung paano nga po namin directly makakakuha ng mga information din sa mismong Facebook page nga po ng Intramuros After Dark. Tapos, naging kahinaan din po nun, as much as we also want to participate and also to engage sa mismong night walk tours po, habang ginagawa po namin yung paper, wala po silang nirelease at that moment. And ngayon lang po sila nag-release kung kailan natapos na po namin yung paper po namin. Kaya po naging issue rin po namin doon na mabigyan emphasis nga po yung mismong Intramuros After Dark para magbigyan po ng highlight yung mismong night walk tours itself.
Kaya ko pala nabanggit yung sa content, no? Kasi kahit naman yung day tours ng Intramuros dati, marami kaming naririnig sa mga iba't ibang mga yung sa content ng tour guide, no? So kaya naalala ko parang crucial din yung content nila. Pero tama nga kayo, no? Ano pa ito? Baka ibang aspect pa ito ng paper na eventually pwede ninyong ma-develop. Okay, thank you. At saka gusto ko yung personal experience talaga, totoo. Yung ang office ko dati ay tapat ng Fort Santiago. So nag-overnight doon yung aking isang office mate. At alam mo, pagising niya, may nakakita siya ng general daw na nasa harapan niya.
Okay, thank you, sir. So before we head to the open forum, may comment dito by an anonymous attendee. So Wonder Manila is a partner for these night tours. Tapos, sabi sila also, don't call it travel agencies. More of a tour organizer or heritage conservation groups daw. So, okay, so we'll now head to the open forum. Pero since we're running out of time, overtime na, kung ano na lang mga nandito na right now sa Q&A, yun na lang yung sagutin natin. So, first question by an anonymous attendee. Since there is a lack of Filipinism in Intramuros night walks, how can we empower visitors with a sense of nationalism, especially since the background of Intramuros dark history is grounded on war, torture, and brutality on the Filipino people? Please.
Hello, sir.
Glory.
Ayan
Yes.
po. Bali, the Filipinos play a vital role po talaga in the Intramuros up to this day po. And despite po the fact that Filipinos experience torture, war po, at saka yung mga iba pang bagay, yung Intramuros night tours naman po, sir, ay parang more on, din po siya, pagkilala ng identity natin as Filipino, because yung history naman natin bilang Filipino, it's not just about the winnings, but also the struggle and the tragic past. And also by knowing that, we became more sensitive na ito yung mga bagay na deserve natin at hindi natin deserve, or di kaya ito yung mga bagay na dapat hindi na ma-repeat sa atin. So, should not limit ourselves only knowing the winnings of our identity as Filipino, but also the tragic past in order to learn from it po. And also, the essence of the study naman po in knowing our own identity is that Intramuros is not only an aesthetic place you can post on Instagram or on your social media. It is about a place wherein stories of dark history and other narration plays an important event in our own identity. Mas pagpapaunlad din po siya sa identity natin as Filipino kasi nagiging sensitive enough tayo na dito pala sa lugar na to namatay yung mga magigiting na mga general or di kaya kung sino pa po. So nagiging sensitive yung mga turista natin na hindi lang siya aesthetic, pero may kwento sa likod nito. Ayun po. And I think that's enough in knowing our own identity as Filipino po.
Okay, so the next question is somehow connected na sa sagot mo. So, how will we develop historical empathy amongst the participant of the Intramuros Nightwalks tour? So, Angelica.
Ayun po, I would also like to emphasize nga po yung mismong cultural beliefs ng mga tao, since it's also a way na we have introduced na ginagamit nga natin yung culture para mas ma-engage yung mismo mga tao na yun. In regards naman sa empathy mismo ng mga tao, if we were, yung history kasi, it shouldn't be exclusive. Everyone should be involved, everyone should be enlightened about it, and no one is accepted. We need to practice that type of thinking as Filipinos, kasi the more that we continuously deny that this history had happened in the past and we are entirely related to it, we can never say that we have actually developed in the sense of being a Filipino. So by using the cultural belief itself, and also by trying to represent the dark history na connected nga dun mismo sa cultural belief ng mga tao na yun, we continue to grow that certain type of practice na talaga nade-develop siya through time. As long as we continue having these types of tours, na yun nga po yung binibigyang emphasis niya, yung mismong dark history ng Intramuros. Pero at the same time, it is also enjoyable and also memorable for the people kasi there is a certain culture that is entirely related to them. Yun lang po.
Okay, thank you. So, next question from anonymous attendee again. How do the tour guides discuss or tackle particularly sensitive events or stories that occurred at Intramuros to tourists? For example, the circumstances that led to the deaths of the persons buried at the mass grave beside the Fort Santiago dungeons. Okay, Angelica?
Ayun po, isa sa mga nabasa kong articles that had led me to the idea na kailangan nga tayo as Filipinos tanggapin natin yung mismong nangyari sa atin na nakaraan ng walang butas, walang labis, walang kulang is dahil nga yung mismong history natin, tinatanggap siya at talagang inaaral natin at talagang iniintindihan natin bilang Pilipino. At bilang history major, nakikita natin ngayong kawalan ng importansya ng kasaysayan sa mga bawat Pilipino. At dahil nga nandun yung mismong way of thinking na hindi binibigang emphasis yung mga nangyari sa atin sa nakaraan, kahit man hindi siya maganda, parang dinedeny nga natin yung mismong area of development kasi nawawala yung sense ng pagiging Pilipino natin at hindi natin naiintindihan kung bakit nga ba dumating tayo sa punto na ganito yung pagiging Pilipino natin. At isa na sa parang mabibigay kong example dito is yung sa Auschwitz Museum. Kahit ganoon ka-grave yung nangyari sa kanila, maraming mga turista yung talagang umiintindi at inaalam yung nangyari doon. Hindi naman masama na kailangan nating intindihin yung mismong kamatayan ng karamihan ng tao na yun kasi natural naman talaga siya nangyayari. Pero nagiging mali siya kapag dinedeny natin na maraming ang kamatayan na nangyari doon sa mismong Intramuros. At isa na rin yung atake sa mismong kasaysayan natin bilang mga Pilipino. Kaya yung konsepto ng pag-aaral nga ng kasaysayan, hindi siya maganda, hindi siya nakakalambot ng puso at talagang nakakalungkot siya the more na nagbabasa ka ng mga konteksto o kaya mga kwento sa nakaraan natin. Pero bilang Pilipino, dapat magkaroon tayo ng sense of responsibility na talagang tatanggapin natin siya as it is. Yun po.
Okay.
May sasabihin po.
You're raising your hand?
Okay, so dagdag ko lang din po, since naganap po sila ng example dito sa Intramuros mismo, meron pong naging virtual tour yung Wonder Manila na ganito rin ang theme. So ang ginawa nila is kinuwento lang po talaga nila, no holds barred, na hindi po nila dinanay kung ano po yung gravity ng situation. And sa Intramuros mismo is may cite yung mass grave na sinasabi po nung questioner na talagang kino-commemorate natin na dapat na ito yung nangyari, wala tayong dinideny na ganito talaga pinagdaanan natin. So, yun po.
Okay, so last two questions. Are there other possible historical sites in the Philippines that possess characteristics fit for dark history? If yes, how can we expand the growth of this industry in the country? Angelica?
Ayun, since yung mismong concept nga ng pagka-commercialize ng culture as a way of understanding the dark history, hindi pa siya entirely prevalent sa local perspective. As you have seen earlier sa mga RRL discussion ng dalawa kong groupmates, especially kay Ian, nangyayari siya on a foreign narrative. Pero dito sa Philippines, since marami naman places sa atin talaga ang naganapan ng parang may dark na history itself, maganda sana na makapag-explore pa tayo sa mismo mga lugar na yun. Kasi yung mismong concept ng night walk tours na related sa dark history, nakikita lang siya sa Intramuros, and we cannot exactly give a concrete example ng mga lugar talaga na may ganitong type of tourism, since napaka-unique nga na nangyayari sa Intramuros itself. So yung regarding naman po dun sa example, we really do want to apologize na hindi kami makapagbigay ng concrete na lugar. Although yung idea of using like the folk Catholic belief ng mga tao, nagagawa na rin siya ng iba't ibang mga tao. Halimbawa yung sa White House, if I do remember correctly, sa Baguio, or yung mga lugar na po yun, may involvement ng folk Catholic beliefs na yun. Tapos yun mismo yung dinadayo ng mga tao. And also, may apologies po sa ingay dito. And also, nagiging way din yun para mag-engage yung mga tao na pumunta mismo sa lugar na yun. So yung parang po yung masasuggest namin on this aspect din po. Si Chloe po may sasabihin.
Ay, ano po pala, habang nagbabasa po tungkol sa mga night tours, meron pong, hindi lang po Intramuros yung gumagawa ng ghost tours actually. Yun nga po, katulad ng sinabi ni Angge, meron pong parang Baguio night tours, meron pong ganon. Tapos sa Corregidor po, we were able to experience that when I was young. May Corregidor night tours din sila. And of course, sa Siquijor po, actually, sa Siquijor, ang tawag nila ay aswang tours. Ayan. So, yan po yung mga bagay or hindi yung mga po kung gaano ka diverse nga po yung night tours po sa iba't ibang lugar sa Pilipinas. At very flexible din po siya kung ano yung kultura at kung paano ito tinatanaw ng isang lugar kung saan ito nagmumula. So, nakadepende din po siya kung ano yung kultura ng mga taong gumagampan doon sa isang sitwasyon. Kaya po, glimpse of culture po talaga ang bawat night tours. The very reason why we choose this as well. And also, yun nga po, not knowing yung history, yung emphasis po talaga ng namin ay yung history. It is not only written by victors. It is also about the shared struggle, the winnings, and also the failures of the whole Philippines. Parang ganyan po.
Okay, thank you. May comment dito, correction. The night tours begin at Escolta, post office, and the last destination is inside Intramuros. So, from an anonymous attendee, yun daw yung itinerary. And then, yung last question natin na pumasok kanina ay, from Annabel Leogan, as a DOT accredited NCR tour guide, I already suggested it before dinner time of our guest. Can we have your idea to be discussed to us? Please give us specific itinerary.
Hello sir, I think po yung tungkol dun sa itinerary, pwede po namin siyang ma-discuss after po as a group kung lahat makapag-send po kami ng schedule po kasama ng mga gusto pong kumausap na sa amin regarding this study po. Ayun, pag-uusapan po muna namin as a group dahil after po nito, meron pa kami mga dapat ipasa po sa aming dean at dean po namin yung OJT advisor po namin. And after nun po, pag free na po yung time ng bawat isa dahil nasa mga councils and other organizations po kami. Kaya after po nun, sir, magsiset po kami ng schedule and date po dun po sa nag-invite sa amin. Pero sobrang appreciated po talaga namin lahat ng mga invitations ninyo kasi hindi po namin inaasahan na ganito po pala talaga tatanggapin yung paper po namin, lalo na sobrang po kami kasi may mumu yung title or di kaya kung ano pa po, pero nakaka-overwhelm lang po yung pagtanggap ng bawat isa, and yun nga po, natapos namin yung paper within a given span of time. Ayun, salamat po talaga.
Okay, so may pumasok pang isang question kanina. So sagutin na rin natin kasi isa na lang naman. Based on the findings, what insights can you give on how the post-war Intramuros is explained or construed by these tour guides? Si Angelica?
Ayan po, as we mentioned nga po kanina, naging limitation po yan sa amin as part of the researchers kasi as much as we do want to experience the night walk tours itself, may limited information na rin po kasing available online since majority of the posts that we have based and also the people that we have gathered po ng data namin, hindi po sila specifically nag-imply ng mga content na natutunan po nila dito. Overall po kasi na nilalagay nila dun are the experiences and also the general gist nga po kung ano yung nag-gather nila dun sa mismo night walk tours itself. Pero if ever na magkaroon nga po kami ng opportunity na maka-experience nga po ng night walk tours na ito at naging mas inclusive nga po siya sa mga tao, mas maganda nga po na para mas mabibigyan po talaga namin ng emphasis yung mismo binibigay na insights ng mismong tour guide po sa night walk tours itself po. Yun lang.
Okay, so thank you, and that's the last question for this presentation. Congratulations. And before we end, once again, in CIS, we recognize that academic freedom is inherent to research. So, the opinions expressed by our interns in their papers and presentations during their internship with us do not necessarily reflect any statement, stand, or position of the Intramuros administration or of any of its personnel. Moreover, inclusion of research papers or project proposals in the online database of the Center for Intramuros Studies or the website of the Intramuros administration do not necessarily constitute as an endorsement. And to close this intern talk, for updates about Intramuros, join our Viber community by scanning the QR code here or following the link bit.ly/IA-Viber. This is also posted on our social media accounts. And lastly, I'd like to promote our social media pages. The Intramuros administration is on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube. And that is all for now. Thank you everyone for attending. Thank you to our panelists and congratulations to our interns. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, everyone.